Introduce everybody. All right. Excellent. Excellent. We are live from different corners of the globe. We'll get to that in a moment. This is LeaderSHIP 2.0, episode number 7. And for those that have tuned in the past, audio is coming back. Hold on a second. All right. I just had my audio coming back to me. Interesting. I've got an echo. Hold on. I'm going to check the settings. Interesting. Is it echoing on your end? Can you guys, or are you hearing me just once?
No, I don't hear that.
All right, very good. We'll try it again. All right, this is Joseph MoJOE McCarthy. It's coming back. Let's go. All right. Hold please. Why is it doing that? All right, let's see.
Joe, I will say that when you seem to be catching that echo, your voice does get a little, the sound of your voice gets a little distorted.
All right. Okay, hold please. Not sure what's going on here, but look, I'll be right back.
Well, here we are.
Well, we'll just chat a little bit here.
Let's introduce ourselves because I know that's what he's going to ask us to do anyway. Rick?
Absolutely. He came back quickly.
That was awesome. Joe, I just suggested that Rick go ahead and introduce himself. How's your audio now? I mean,
It's still echoing. So you guys, introduce yourselves and I'll be right back.
Okay.
All right. My name is Rick Olson. I live in Northwest Wisconsin. I grew up in a minister's home, so I'm a preacher's kid, a PK. When I was a kid, my favorite song was "The Only One Who Could Ever Reach Me Is the Son of a Preacher Man." I thought that was an awesome theme song for my life. After college, spent my early years in youth ministry, did that for 15 years, traveled all over America speaking to youth in all kinds of youth settings. And then after 15 years of that, I transitioned into business consulting. And I've been doing that now for 30 plus years. I've had the privilege of working with companies in all 50 states, and large and small, but always working on cultural issues. No company brings me in to do an IT audit. They don't bring me in to check the books. They bring me in to work on their workplace culture. And that's where my sweet spot is. That's what I am passionate about. So that's what I've been doing for the past 30 years. It's been a fantastic life. And my relationship with Joe McCarthy goes back to his high school days. He was in a youth camp that I spoke at, and that's my early connection with Joe McCarthy. We've been friends for decades. It's been a wonderful, wonderful journey. So that's a little bit about the life and times of Rick Olson.
Beautiful. I love knowing that you and Joseph go as far back as you do, and that you maintained connection from when he was in a youth camp, from when he was a youngin' then.
He was a very talented youngster. He stood out. He had a great personality. He was one of the best musicians that I had met for a teenager. And he just impacted people very positively all around him. And so I knew that he had a very bright future ahead. And it was fun to connect then and then stay connected over the years. So that's the story.
Yes.
Lovely.
And we're sticking with it.
Yes.
Well,
Angelina. Well, before we go to Angelina, Rick, you might have said this already, but where are you broadcasting from today?
Today, Orlando, Florida. I've been doing some work down here, and it's a combo work and pleasure. My wife is with me on this trip, and done a fair amount of work. Most of that's behind me, and now we got some fun times ahead. So we're loving it in Orlando. It's so nice to leave Wisconsin to warm up. And just the other night, we went and saw one of my favorite singing groups, Straight No Chaser, and they put on an amazing Christmas concert, and it was fabulous. So that's where I'm hanging out right now.
Awesome. Angelina, where are you hanging out right now?
Beautiful. I am hanging out in the home of my family here in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And down here, just kind of taking care of stuff with the family and preparing to move a project that I started more than a decade ago, moving it forward now. So let's see. Joe and I know each other.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do, what you're up to professionally.
Yeah. So I am an executive coach and consultant, and I work with leaders who are curious about what it means to lead from within. And the title of this broadcast actually is Soulful Leadership. And so you can see how I would be interested to get to participate in this. And really, I think the focus of my work is supporting people who are in these positions of leadership to reconnect with a deeper inner understanding of what purpose is. And really, it's not to like help them discover their purpose as much as it is to really take an assessment of their life and take a look at all of the places, the choices that they've made, the experiences that they've had, the things that turn them on, the things that turn them off, and help them to kind of take a life assessment and really recognize and notice how purpose has been moving throughout their lives. And this one awareness is a profoundly impactful realization for people, especially who are in a leadership role, because they come to see themselves differently, but it also very much deeply impacts the way that they see others around them and the way that they interact with them. And that culture piece, Rick, that you were mentioning is really, a leader is at the heart of his team, sometimes even at the heart of his company or his corporation. And where he is and how he's doing inside of himself is going to have a tremendous impact on how the company and the culture and everything goes. So, yeah.
Very good. So I want to point out to the viewers and the listeners that each of us come from a different perspective, a different experience. Rick and I have some similarities in our background and our church upbringing, et cetera. But career-wise, I've been in the nonprofit and faith-based world my entire career. And Rick has kind of split, and I'll let him talk a little bit about how his career took a big turn right in the center. So now he's got half of a faith-based background and now half in the corporate America, in the secular world, you might say. And Angelina has worked extensively in corporations with executives who work in a non-faith-based organization, even though she's a deep spiritual person and her faith comes out of her mouth quite often because that's the way she thinks and the way she sees the world. But what I love about that is that each of us are coming at this conversation with quite a bit of a diverse experience here. And I think that'll really kind of round out what we're talking about. So first of all, let's set up some definitions just so we're all talking about the same thing. Soulful leadership. I made a post on that not long ago on my blog. And the idea of soulful leadership from my perspective is the intersection or integration, or maybe both, intersection or integration of a person's spiritual nature or their faith, you might say, into their career, especially in a leadership position. And I'm not talking just CEOs, although that has its own animal. It's its own animal to wrestle. But when you get into the place where you're leading a team, and depending on the environment that your work is at, there has been a time in our history, and Rick can speak of this as well, where you had to leave your faith at the door or you get yourself in trouble. But that's shifting. It's shifting in the culture. And let's talk a little bit. So Rick, when you think about soulful leadership, what comes to mind for you? How would you define that? And how have you seen that kind of play itself out in your worlds?
I grew up as a preacher's kid. I spent 15 years in youth ministry and camps and conventions or retreats. And it was just very upfront. This is what a relationship with God is about. This is kind of what it looks like. And then I went over to the corporate world and it's like, what does that look like from me now? And I was challenged by that whole thing, because faith is foundational for everything I do in my life. I don't want to be overt. I don't want to be deceitful. I don't want to hide. I want to find that right spot. And I finally kind of came to the conclusion that I had to be Rick Olson up in front of the crowd. And the thing that made me me, I had to be that. I couldn't be a faker, just an imitation, someone else. Just be the Rick Olson that you were created to be. How has that worked for me? It's worked really well. I don't force spirituality into the workplace, but there are times when the most appropriate reference may be some kind of a biblical reference, and I'll do that. And how has that worked? I've been doing this over 30 years. I've been called on it 3 times. 3 times I got my wrist slapped. I figured once every 10 years, I can handle that.
Right.
And so I haven't backed off a lot. I am sensitive and aware, but if the very best story I could tell in a moment happened to be a story that was a biblical story, I'll tell it. You know, hey, this happened thousands of years ago, and I'll tell the story, that type of thing. Lots of great response, and 3 times in 30 plus years, my wrist got slapped.
Yeah. So one of the things I love about Rick, and he's told me tons of stories, is that oftentimes in the church, so as a youth pastor, as an evangelist, doing the speaking thing in the church setting, Rick often felt like the audience was like a set of judges at the Olympics, and they've all got their white card, and they're evaluating whether or not Rick Olson gets a 4 or a 6 or a 10. And of course, the East German judges always give him a 0, because that's what East German judges do. But that this sense like he was having to perform for the approval of the audience, but he takes that exact same message, but not necessarily in a preaching mode, but in a consulting, coaching, mentoring mode, and finds that this audience, right, who's now business people who want to succeed and want to excel and want to profit, they're eating it up. They're like, tell me more. Where's this wisdom come from? This is the greatest thing I ever heard. And he didn't get the judgment and comparison thing that he got in the faith-based organization, which I got to tell you, it's true. And it's really ironic, right? That here's a man whose faith is at the center of everything he says. But when he says it in a faith-based organization, they're critical, and he says it in a non-faith-based organization, and they're eating it up like it's candy. Like, oh man, this is the best thing since sliced bread. Did I say that right, Rick? Does that represent?
Yeah, you did, and it is a fascinating thing. But there's just something within, I believe, every person that's longing for greater significance, the why am I on this planet, that sort of thing. And when you speak to that, something comes alive inside of people. So I've been very pleased with the responses of many, many folks.
All right, let's throw this over to Angelina. So Angelina comes from a completely different experience, and I love that about her. And I've talked to her at length, hours and hours, about how spirituality informs her life, her understanding of the world, the way things work, and she's got a brilliant mind. So Angelina, from your perspective, how have you seen the integration or intersection of spirituality, faith, in the workplace that isn't a faith-based organization?
I'm going to come at this in a roundabout way.
Great.
I remember when I was studying, and I was all over the place in the humanities department, and I was into sociology and psychology and philosophy and political science. And eventually I bumped into cultural anthropology. But even before I bumped into that, one of the things that I noticed, Western civilization, right? One of the things that I noticed is that there was this commonality among all of these things. There were places where the same kinds of principles showed up. Now, fast forward a little bit, I've always been deeply spiritual as a person. I had a couple of hard knocks in my experience with the particular church that my parents had us involved with, and that kind of set me back on my path. But I think it was a necessary setback, because for that period of time where I was, quote unquote, at war with the concept of God. And really, I say concept because I wasn't actually obviously at war with what I've come to understand that concept to mean in a more experiential way. But I had to kind of go through and sort of suss out. And then as I continued on my journey now, more open to this understanding, I started to see that there are so many different systems and disciplines that all reflect these deeply spiritual principles, like the set of permaculture principles, all kind of have this commonality with the 12 steps that you might see in any anonymous program, that also have commonality with the principles that you see in Don Miguel Ruiz's book, which is something that we just looked at, and so many other things. So I like to draw on all of these other disciplines that I've immersed myself into, recognizing that there are a lot of people who don't orient in that spiritual way. And that those are the people who, to me, are the ones who are most hungry for an experience. And so the work that I like to do helps people to make contact with something inside of themselves, maybe something ineffable, something that isn't necessarily included in their vocabulary or their conceptual realm, so that they themselves can start getting traction with their own relationship with themselves, which is where our relationship with that which is creating all occurs. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I feel like pausing here.
I love where you're going with this, and because even in this discussion, you use a different language in describing the same thing that I do or that Rick would. But that doesn't mean we're talking about something different. What you're really talking about is at the core of me being human, right? Regardless of my quote unquote faith or religion, there is something that I know is way beyond just the senses, just the physical 3D world that I'm living in. And I think what we talked about with Rick earlier is that when Rick introduces a principle that he knows is based in the Bible, and that's the way he was taught it, but it speaks to how does one find purpose and meaning in life, and what's really going on beyond just what I can see and use my five senses for. It perks people up. People are like, yeah, I want to know, right? And maybe they don't have a background, they don't have an overlay, they don't have a faith or a religion, but there is something inside them that says, there's something really true about this, and I feel it, I sense it, even though it's not my normal five senses. Rick, am I hitting on something that you've experienced?
Oh yeah, you are. And I have a family who's immersed in ministry. I have a sister who married a pastor. I have two brothers who are currently pastors today. They talk to me about my world, and they say things like, your life sounds so gratifying. And it's interesting to hear that coming from people who are standing in the pulpit every Sunday morning and preaching to their congregations, to talk about my life in the marketplace being a gratifying life. But I think they're maybe just a little bit envious of the fact that I am in the marketplace. They're in the very safe confines of the walls of their church. They all know each other. They all know how to act. They all know how to speak the language. They know how to greet. They know how to give the benediction. They know all that stuff. And then being in a crowd where it's not expected that anything would be done or said that would in any way reflect on anything spiritual, you do see kind of this coming alive, this bit of amazement. I have lots of people who come up at intermission and they want to talk, and it struck a chord with them. And so there's something about bringing this light to a place where people aren't expecting it, that's a very powerful thing. And it is a very gratifying thing. And so I honor my brothers as being pastors. I wouldn't trade spots with them in a moment. I'm hanging out in the marketplace. That's where I want to be.
Yeah. Very good. So, that's very encouraging to me. Of course, I have spent my entire career in a faith-based organization, but in many ways, it feels like the old saying that I'm singing to the choir, right? We all have the same song, we all have the same verse, and everybody's nodding their head, yeah. But I'm not really reaching anybody that doesn't already have a pretty much similar beliefs that I do. When there's a part of me that says, this has been so transformative in my understanding of myself, as Angelina talked about, my connection to who I am as a human, and then that transcendent connection between me as a human and my creator. And people give different names to that, right? But I call it God, and Rick calls it God, and I think Angelina calls it God. But she's has her own experience. We all have our own experience. And actually that point is so relevant in this discussion, is that religions kind of put everybody under a particular umbrella and say, we all believe these things and we say it this way. But when it comes down to it, even the people I've worked with in Christian organizations, each one has a very individualized relationship with their creator, with God. And we may talk the same language and we can nod our heads and say, yeah, me too. But there is something that's not just a great idea or a theology or a religion, but it really is, as Angelina said, an experience, what I call relationship, right, with something that's way beyond my understanding. And that's not only interesting, it's actually essential to my well-being. Angelina, jump in there, please.
So one of the books that I picked up recently, again, is that awesome book by Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I know the first time that I picked that book up, I was probably in my 20s, and it was just in the beginning of my career in corporate. And one of the things that I'm seeing about it now, as I go through it this time from a completely different angle, is that the principles in there basically boil down to two. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and judge not lest ye be judged.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Like
Yep.
these are everybody can agree, and it doesn't matter where those words came from. Like in the book, I noticed yesterday he was referring to that passage, judge not lest ye be judged, but he quoted Abe Lincoln as the one who said it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was, it was contextual because he was, and I'm sure that Abe did say it, but I'm sure that Abe was also, a man of God.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you can't argue with these things. Right. And these are principles that are really basically supporting us as human beings. It's kind of giving us like a way to orient as we are on our own, respective sea of life, to how to create a life that sucks less.
I love that. A life that
Right?
sucks less. Yes. Yeah.
I teach customer service across America, and I have 10 commitments that I lay out on how to be a world-class service provider. And one of them is embracing the golden rule. And I go through that and I read it and I say, you know what? Let's look at this one. If this one was followed, we don't need any of these other 9 right here. Throw all of them away. None are needed. This is the one. And it was said thousands of years ago. It's never been improved upon. But that is the ultimate way to give exceptional service to anyone. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Yeah.
Yes.
So good. Yeah. I love that Rick calls it the 10 commitments, right? Because it leads to the 10 commandments, which hung above my bed in a very, it was I know it was plaster of Paris, but it looked like, it was carved out of the wall by God. And so I had that all memorized because I stared at it every night before I fell asleep. But this is really interesting because Rick and Angelina both are huge readers. And so you read all sorts of books on leadership and effectiveness and customer service and conflict resolution. And so I'd love to ask the two of you how often, I'm not sure exactly what the question is, but the overlay between really good business principles, turns out those are also very good spiritual principles, which is no surprise. This is a continuation of what we're talking about, is that a principle that really works, right? That it doesn't harm you, it doesn't harm the other person. It actually cultivates good relationships. It cultivates trust, right? The things that are actually essential for good relationships are essential for good business. And the things that are good for a family is actually good for a business a lot of times. And you start, like you're all talking about, this overlay. Like Angelina, I was a student of cultural anthropology in college only because it sounded sexy and I thought I could get dates. But it turns out that cultural anthropology is looking at cultures around the world throughout history, and they have a few things in common. And one of them is the golden rule. No matter whether you're in the jungles of Papua New Guinea or, downtown New York City, every culture somehow, what a coincidence, comes down to this idea that you should treat others the way you want to be treated. Well, where did that come from, right? So the question really is, do you see overlays and overlaps, and maybe give some examples between a really great business principle and how that is really, it's a spiritual principle, and both are essential for really good business? Whoever wants to jump in there.
I'll jump in. I read a lot. To me, if you're a leader, it's a prerequisite. You have to read. If you don't read, you just say the same thing you've always said. There's nothing interesting coming out of your mouth. There's no new insights. There's no freshness. Get rather stale if we don't read. So always exposing myself to new thoughts. And when I jumped into the business world, I was fascinated to see the impact of guys like Ken Blanchard, Zig Ziglar, and now in these days, John Maxwell. And all of them are outstanding business writers, leadership writers, and all of them are coming from a very strong faith base in their own life. And they're wise enough to teach business principles in a very palatable way for everyone. But if you understand spiritual principles, you understand where all of these are coming from and what's the underlying current. And so they got their inspiration from biblical principles, and they took them and fleshed them out in the business world. And they're three of the most well-read authors in the world when it comes to leadership and business principles. So from time to time, I do a seminar just called The Bible in Business. And we invite all these business people to come in. And when they come in, they have a nice notebook to go through for the day. They have a brand new Bible. They have a brand new highlighter. And I said, today we're going to talk about delegation. We're going to talk about communication. We're going to talk about empowerment. And we're going to talk about, all these key business principles, but we're going to teach all of them from a biblical perspective. And so knowing that, they would not be able to find Ecclesiastes, I have references throughout the notebook. Turn to page number 735, and we're going to read this together. And we read it. And these business folks come up at the end of the day, and they say, I had no idea that all of this was in there. And so it's quite a revelation for them to discover these fabulous business principles that are woven all through the Bible.
Yeah. Angelina, jump in here, because I know you have a really eclectic spiritual pedigree. You have some experiences that I'm fascinated by, because I haven't had experience that myself. But how have you seen that the that the spiritual principles of how you're wired and what you are understanding about the way the universe is and the one who created it, how do you see that percolate up into business principles, either in your consulting practice or through stuff you've read, things you hear?
So at our core, we are beings, right? What is the nature of our beings? That's a journey of
question.
discovery, yeah,
Right.
for all of us, right? But all of these contexts, these human contexts that we all experience, like Joe, you mentioned family, and then there's community. We mentioned business. All of these are expressions, really. And the thing that all of them have in common is this essence of being that every single one of us has, right? So here's the thing, I really want to say this too, because it's not like, this stuff is easier said than done, because we live in a world where so many of us are just being challenged by all of the things that there are to be challenged in this 3D realm, whether it's, like challenges in your family, or challenges with finance and work, or challenges with just how your heart feels as you contemplate some of the conditions that are going on in the great big world. All of these things are things that we're all impacted by, that we're all grappling with, right? And so it's not the easiest thing necessarily, especially because of the ways that we've learned how to interact with our own sentient nature, many of us, and men even perhaps more so, although this is changing. This is where our lives are happening, is in our feelings, and this is an expression of our beinghood, right? And then there are all of these contexts, and it's challenging to stay on top of being super in the living in these principles. As somebody who's a coach, it's helpful, and a consultant, it's helpful for me to have these as my values, as my ideals, as my principles. And it's certainly a lot easier for me to support another human being in kind of clearing away the dross so that they can anchor into these transcendent truths inside of themselves. But in our moment-to-moment, day-to-day life, where you've got a real thing that needs to happen, and one of your team leaders or one of your project leaders is flailing or whatever, and they're not getting it done, and they're not meeting the timelines or whatever, it's and you're feeling the pressure. It's not that easy to stay in these principles, right? It takes practice, it takes work, because the context that we're all operating in isn't necessarily all operating in this same way. So
yeah, that's really good. So you threw the word practice in there, and I think this is really important to dig in for a little bit. It's interesting that a surgeon is doing medical practice. If he does it poorly, he's doing medical malpractice, right? But even a brain surgeon is practicing, right? A lawyer is practicing. These are the words that they use in their profession to say, hey, I don't have it all together. I'm still learning how to do this all the time. And certainly I wouldn't want a brain surgeon, if I needed a brain surgeon who it was their first surgery, I would want one who's been practicing for a while before they cut me open and start playing with my brain, if they could find it. But all that to say, why do we are very acceptable to talk about a doctor or a lawyer is practicing, but then we bring it into the business world, the corporate world, and practice sounds like you don't have your act together, you don't know what you're doing, and so you shouldn't be a leader. And I think that's really incongruent, because life itself, from my perspective, every day is a practice, right? And I can learn something or not, depending whether I'm going to be aware of it and be humble enough to say, that didn't work. Maybe I should try something different, right? So I'm going to throw this over to Rick now. So Rick, you talk to CEOs a lot. You talk to the top level managers and leaders in the organizations. Do you get the sense from them behind closed doors, because you get to talk to them one-on-one, where they can really tell you what they really feel, that that they're longing, that they're searching for an anchor to the chaos that they're in? Or are they just looking for an easy answer? And there's no one answer for everything, but just talk a little bit about your experience when you're talking to leaders and it gets personal and they know that their name's not attached and they're not going to get reprimanded or reported to HR. What do they talk about when it comes down to what really matters to them in terms of their leadership effectiveness?
I use the phrase, it's lonely at the top. If you do ascend to a CEO role, congratulations, that's fantastic. You have some great perks that are going to come your way, but you have incredible responsibilities, very weighty things that you deal with. And it is lonely at the top. If you go to the top of an organization, people expect that wisdom flows out of you, recognition to all flows out of you, affirmation for everyone just flows out of you. And many times it just doesn't flow back up to the top. So it can be a very quiet and lonely place. And I find them as people who so oftentimes are highly principled. They really do care about their people, and they want wisdom for understanding how they should navigate. Ever since COVID showed up in our world, it's been a crazy world to operate in. I work with 2 government organizations that built huge administrative buildings in 2019. And now at least half of their workers are at-home workers, hybrid workers. Right. Would they have built those same buildings today? No, they wouldn't have. Okay. But they have the buildings, they have the empty space, they have the financial commitment of those. And that's just one small window into what it's like running an organization in a day like today. You have employees who have different work mindsets than employees have years ago. A lot of our CEOs, maybe they are the baby boomer type folks. And it was all about hard work and dedication. And they have young, very talented employees, but they're certainly not going to sacrifice any family time, for the betterment of the company and stuff like that. And they're trying to figure out, where did this come from? What's this all about? That's different than my generation. So they're dealing with different work perspectives, work expectations, financial pressures, and they desire wisdom and understanding for knowing how to navigate through all of that. I have a CEO of one of the finest financial institutions in the country. She sleeps with a notepad by her bed every night because she said God wakes her up in the middle of the night with an idea. She rolls over and writes it down and then goes back to sleep. And that's what her nights look like. And she's doing a magnificent job of leading her organization. But she's looking for all the wisdom she can get. And for her, finding that in her relationship with God is helping her navigate through some really turbulent waters for any leader today.
Yeah. Angelina, same question. So you've done a lot of consulting of high-level leaders, managers who want to succeed in their job, and part of their job is knowing how to manage people. In fact, that's probably more important than doing the day-to-day actions of their job. But unfortunately, what I have seen, and I've heard from both of you, generally a great worker gets promoted to their level of incompetence. So I'm good at this level and I get promoted at that level, and then I'm really good at that level, and suddenly I'm the rising star, and then I get promoted to manager. And suddenly I don't have to do any work. I'm supposed to manage the people who are doing the work, and I don't know how to do that. And there's no training, and I have no experience. And so suddenly I'm left here in this new quote unquote good job, pays well, it's got the nice office and the title, and I don't know what I'm doing because I've never managed people before. I've only managed myself. And so how do you consult those people, Angelina, when they're looking for how I don't want to be incompetent, right? I was promoted because I'm very competent, and now I don't know what I'm doing because I'm dealing with human beings. And whether you're in a secular setting or a spiritual setting, every leader says the same thing to me at some point. This would be an easy job if it weren't for the people, right? Because people they're complex, they're highly volatile, they've got variables, and no two are the same. So how do we as consultants, mentors, coaches, how do you, Angelina, help people get grounded and find what is their true north? Where is their compass? So that in the turbulent times when the ship is all over the waves and people are looking to the captain, what do we do now? That they have some clue how to lead this crew that just wants to get through the storm.
There are two prongs to this answer. One of them, and both of them have to do, by the way, with remembering. In one strain, I show them some very, very, very simple exercises that help them to activate and engage their own miraculous mind with a heightened level of awareness on the qualities of mind that they are and have been working with all day long, every day. And I show them how to leverage those qualities of mind, including attention, intention, curiosity, and their ability to appreciate the present state, which, by the way, is the opposite of judge.
Yes. Right.
And I show them how to leverage their mind, work with it more consciously and more intentionally. And again, I'm only helping them to remember.
Yeah.
Because they're already, and just turning up the volume on their conscious interaction with this miraculous creative tool that we've all been endowed with. And on the other side, I have a lot of questions. I leverage curiosity myself that are very specific to helping them to remember themselves. And this is where that purpose piece comes in. You know, purpose is a big question, but there is a way, a line of inquiry that can support them in, they have all of the answers inside of themselves. And often what they're bumping into in their challenge has more to do with their own self-perception and stories that they've got about themselves, and perhaps some lack of experience. But that lack of experience pales in comparison to their lack of really remembering and knowing themselves and integrating this into their conscious awareness.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, so how that has showed up in my past through leaders who have the authority, they've been given the authority in the organization, but they don't have the self-worth or self-security piece in place. And so my observation is they feel like they have to get it right all the time, and that everybody in the organization is judging whether or not they're getting it right all the time. Now that may or may not be true, but unfortunately that really works against the leader. And when a leader, in my experience, when a leader is insecure and they're always concerned about others' approval and or opinion, which they're tying to their own ability to lead, well, that's a really rough go, right? That's rough on the leader. It's rough on the follower because nobody knows where to land. Rick, have you seen this? Have you seen this play out in the work world?
Absolutely. I want to, if I can, Joe, I'd like to talk too about the young leader who steps into that role, who hasn't had the training. It usually goes like this: somebody taps you on the shoulder and says, "We've been watching you. You're really good. We got a corner office for you. You'll be awesome. Go get them."
Go. Right.
And there they are. And all of a sudden it's like, oh my word, I was so good at doing this. And I'm so out of my element doing this. And so some of my messages to give, especially to my young leaders, are, I talk about difficult employees, and they've been around since the beginning of time. And my two favorite illustrations of difficult employees are George Washington handpicked this man. He did an awesome job. He built a winning team, but he is the guy that picked Benedict Arnold to be on his team. Didn't work out real well. Yeah. Jesus handpicked. He wanted 12 on his team. Did an awesome job. 12 all-stars? No, not really. 11 of them worked out really well. That one guy, Judas, didn't work out so well. So my contention is, if George picks Benedict. Jesus picks Judas. Who are you to think you can go through life without any difficult people? They have always been around. They'll always be around. So don't beat yourself up if you have somebody you can't reach, if you have that difficult one that you can't transform. The best of the best couldn't. And so it's probably going to happen with us too. So cutting ourselves a little slack in that area. And then as far as developing people, and to me, the moment you're in management, you're in the people building business. That is the business you're in. I tell all my manager friends, do not be seduced by your office. Do not be seduced by your computer. Staring into your computer is not the best use of your time and day. Connect with your people. And my inspiration for that is, how did Jesus take 12 ignorant and unlearned fishermen and turn them into world changers? He invested a lot of time in them, and then he gave them incrementally larger assignments that they could accomplish. Yeah. Early assignments were pretty easy. Have the people sit down in groups of 50. Get me a donkey. Set up a meal. They're like, we got it. We're all over it. But over a 3-year period, the assignments got more and more complex, more challenging, more demanding. And to me, that's what a good manager does. They set their employees up for early success, build upon that, and then keep stretching them and moving them to a higher place, so that these people gain some confidence. Yes, I can do that. So the one who's coming in new, to me, there's some very important things for them to be thinking about. Cut themselves a little slack. George didn't reach everybody. Jesus didn't. You're probably not gonna. We can live with that. But have a plan for incrementally stretching your people and giving them confidence in their growth.
So it seems to me that you talked a lot about what a healthy leader can do and developing their followers, right? Wanting them to succeed, giving them incremental assignments so they can build upon their success. But let's talk a little bit about the leader who isn't so secure, who isn't really understanding that their job is developing other people. They feel like they have to succeed, they have to win, they have to be the answer guy. I mean, the expectations, as you said, lonely at the top, Rick, the expectations of a high-level leader are absolutely ridiculous. They're insane. You have to be the funniest person, you have to be the most compassionate person, you have to be the smartest person, you have to be the hardest worker, you have to have the best family, on and on and on. The expectations are every CEO should be Jesus, almost, which I think feeds the insecurity when you're at the top. Like, I can't be weak. I can't make a mistake. I got to surround myself with people who aren't quite as smart as I am. So I'm the smartest person in the room, which is a terrible strategy, as we all know. But then you see these leaders who are thriving today in today's marketplace, who are saying things like, I better not be the smartest person in the room, right? I'm surrounding myself with the smartest people I can get on my team. Elon Musk is a great example, right? I'm going to find the smartest people in every field and pay them extraordinary amounts of money so that they're on my team. And do I understand everything they're saying? Maybe not, but they do, and they're playing for me, right? And there's a complete different perspective on, do I have to be the answer guy and the stable guy and the pastor and all the stuff, right? Versus, hey, I'm just the conductor. You all play an instrument, and I can't play the oboe, I can't play the flute, I can't play the bassoon, but I can keep you all on time and in tune and on track so that we all finish at the same time and create a beautiful orchestra along the way. I can help you play nicely together. But how do you take a person who's so consumed with whether or not they're doing a good job and help them come to the place where I'm doing a good job when you're doing a good job? How do you get to embrace that? Angelina, jump in here.
I think, at least my experience is that it really helps to support them in reorienting themselves with regard to their concept of what leadership is. As Rick pointed out earlier, things are changing, and the young people, be it there's a tremendous amount of talent and intelligence there. There is also a different value system there than the ones of our predecessors. And so
Right.
this clash of value systems is one of the things that has to get negotiated, especially when it comes to somebody who's in that boomer layer, with their principles and values and ethics that they came up with, trying to, what probably very much feels a lot of the time, I've heard, the phrase wrangling cats.
Right.
This is plenty, a lot of times. And this idea of leading from behind, of leading by example, of inviting and welcoming the leadership and creating a place, an effective leader in today's world, because of the generations that are coming up behind us, is going to be one who recognizes that people don't want to be led and they don't want to follow. They want to be welcome to stand in and bring to bear all of the experience and intelligence that they've created. They want the freedom to be able to make mistakes and try new things that maybe haven't been tried before. And this brings somebody who is in that boomer generation or before, to a very challenging edge. Because it's like, I don't have I'm in uncharted territory now, right? Because I don't have a whole lot of experience with doing this, but it's worth experimenting, and it's worth giving yourself that space as a leader to experiment and try on new approaches, because not only will you be, by inviting the leadership of your teams, for each individual to really take a greater level of ownership, understanding that you don't have to wear all the hats. That's not what emerging paradigm leadership is, right? The leader in today's world is at the center. He's the one that holds a clear, well-articulated intention very powerfully, so that he's creating a field within which his people can operate in and participate and bring everything that they've got. But he has to create an environment where everybody feels welcome to do this. So
Yeah,
I don't know if I answered your question, but.
So Rick, I'm sure you've come across people in your career who had to find a way to shift from the insecure, I'm the answer guy and I have to do everything myself, to, if I do that, I'm going to die. If I do that for much longer, it's going to kill me. And probably many who got sick because of the stress of that. How did you coach? How have you found an effective way to coach them to change that mind shift to hey, I don't have to be the answer guy. I don't have to do it all myself. In fact, it's much healthier for me and for the entire organization if I give the power out, give the power away.
Well, Joe, I use some of the very same verbiage that you use, and I loved your story about the orchestra conductor. I talk oftentimes about the symphony conductor, and I'll just ask the question: is the symphony conductor the best trumpet player in the orchestra?
No,
usually not.
Right.
Best percussionist? Nope. Best violinist? Nope. What are they the best at? They're the best at bringing it all together. That's the one thing that they do exceptionally well. And so that's a major message that I'm sharing with young leaders. You don't have to be the best. In fact, you shouldn't be the best at all these things. What you should do is be really good at bringing it all together. So being that person, and then being, if you're secure enough to allow somebody to become a star, you can put together a tremendous orchestra. Okay, so just be the symphony conductor. And then I'm just really high on the whole concept of servant leadership. I think that's the finest, that's the highest level of leadership that there is, the leader who's willing to serve. I spent the whole day with a CEO yesterday from Maine, and this guy just lives that stuff out. He has escaped from his office, and he's escaped from his computer, and he's out in his community, and he's with his members, and he's with his staff, and he's discovering these amazing revelations just by being closely connected to all these people, and he's finding out how to serve them best. And he's finding out roadblocks that have made life cumbersome for his workers, and he's removing them. And he never would have known that had he stayed in his office and just stared into his computer. But he got very real, and he got there with them. And there's a transformation going on in this man that's fantastic. But at the core, his desire is to be a leader who serves, doesn't lord it over people, there to set everybody up for success and to serve them well.
Yes, very good. All right, we're down to about 5 minutes here. So if you guys don't mind, I'd like to have you just be really personal in this last segment here and talk about how do you, Angelina, how do you, Rick, integrate and express your understanding of your spirituality, your faith in the marketplace? How does that show up for you? How does it inform who you are? And we'll start with Angelina.
Well, it shows up basically, it's a perfect segue to what Rick just said, because I see myself as I am in service. And this is, to me, my favorite expression of leadership, because there is, to be in service keeps me, first of all, it keeps me anchored deeply into my own sense of purpose and the fulfillment of this. But it also keeps me in right relationship with the people that I am serving. And it keeps me very present to that. It is for me to exemplify rather than tell, to show rather than tell.
Yeah, so become the model rather than the mouthpiece. I love that. Rick, same question to you. How do you integrate what is at the core of who you are as a human being, as a spiritual person in relationship with God? How does that show up in your secular environment?
A part of it is me crossing over to be comfortable with this whole issue and just asking myself if these life-changing principles, which I regard them as life-changing principles, they changed my life.
Right.
These life-changing principles, why would I spend the rest of my life hiding all the principles that changed my life and helped me be a much better person than I was before? Why would I sit on that? Why would I change it? So I don't flaunt it. I'm not overt with it, but it just comes out from time to time. For example, I do 360 evaluations of every leader in the organization. And we do it online. It's very discreet. They get an 8-page report. It's not for the faint of heart, but it's a great way to get better at what you do, hearing what people say about your leadership style. So I'm the guy who goes in and goes through that with them. I look at every page, every comment, every report. We're going to celebrate the bad stuff. We're going to celebrate the good stuff, and we're going to try to minimize the not so good stuff, okay? And then I use a little phrase when I talk about feedback, and it's from Proverbs, and it says, "Faithful are the wounds of a friend."
Right. Say that again.
It's a good friend who tells you when you're screwing up. Your enemy never would. They'll let you bash your head in the wall. They don't care. But it's a good friend who goes, "Hey, you don't want to do that."
Gut bacteria.
So,
Fiber.
I use that. I'm not out preaching it. I just throw it in there because to me, that's just a powerful principle that works everywhere. So,
right. It's good stuff. So, with my last couple minutes here, I've heard it said that the golden rule can actually be taken to another level in what's called the platinum rule. And I think some of you both are somewhat familiar with this. The golden rule says basically treat others the way you want to be treated, which, as we found in anthropology, is the foundation of healthy societies, big and small. The platinum rule says treat others the way they want to be treated, not the way you want to be treated. why does this take it to a whole nother level? Because the only way I can treat Rick or Angelina the way they want to be treated is if I know how they want to be treated. I can't assume, right? This is a Don Miguel Ruiz, one of his principles, don't make assumptions. If I, holy cow, I got incoming, incoming, and I got everything just taken off, being interrupted on every level. Okay, pull it together, Joe. All right. But think about how essential it is for actually having a vibrant, ongoing, open relationship with somebody, because that's the only way that you can treat them the way they want to be treated. I certainly can treat people the way I want to be treated, and that's a great way to start because I know what's best for me. I don't know what's best for you. You think of the 5 love languages, Gary Smalley's book, and people they interpret love different ways, but our default is to love people the way we want to be loved because that means the most to us, and it might not connect with them on that same level. But you get to know your spouse, right, or your significant other, and you find out, okay, they get a lot more out of gift giving or service or, the words than you do. Well, I can keep treating them the way I want to be treated, or I can jack it up a whole nother level, treat them the way they want to be treated. And suddenly, the love and the connection goes on. It explodes. So I just throw that out there as a challenge for myself and for anybody who's listening, that start with the baseline, the golden rule. Whether or not you call the Bible God's word or not is irrelevant in this particular discussion right now. It is the principle that works throughout history. And then challenge yourself to say, am I willing to do the work necessary to find out in the people that I lead directly what actually makes them tick, right? The way they want to be treated, not the way I want to be treated. Can I treat them the way they want to be treated? And the only way I can do that is if I find out, or to use Angelina's very simple equation, ask questions. That's how you find out. And by the way, that builds trust, and trust, as Stephen Covey Jr. says, trust is essential for all business to go fast and to be profitable, on and on it goes. So trust is essential to any relationship, right? So I just love that idea of taking ourselves from the golden rule to the platinum rule. Okay, we're over time, but I would like each of you to just let people know, how can they connect with you once this broadcast is over. Angelina, where will people find you, and how can they engage with you offline?
You can go visit my website, angelinafrost.com, and you can go grab a copy of my book called Connection, which is about this very thing. It's powerful for leaders specifically to learn how to use this attention muscle in an even more intentional way, because you will start to receive a lot more information about those people that you're leading, so that you can learn more about what it is that they want, how they want it.
Beautiful. And so you go right to that URL that's right below her name, right there, right below her face, angelinafrost.com/gift to get her book. All right. Rick Olson, how do people connect with you, sir, offline?
rickolson.com or rickolsonseminars.com. And there's just a whole smorgasbord of things that we do there for organizations. LinkedIn, Rick Olson Seminars as well. And so I would be delighted to help you in any way. So feel free to contact.
Awesome. Okay, so I just want to end by saying how grateful I am to know you two beautiful human beings. You've impacted my life in ways that I could never articulate. Rick, I give Rick credit for inspiring a young teenager with lots of ambition and some talent and lots of energy to say, I want to be like that when I grow up. And here we are 40 years since then, having a discussion on a very peer-to-peer level. And so thank you, Rick, for always believing in me and believing that I had this in me and drawing it out of me, because when servant comes down to servant leadership, you and Wayne Crace, who Angelina referred to earlier, have modeled that in a big way and impacted my life indelibly. So thank you. And Angelina, of course, for bringing Buenos Aires into our discussion, and your amazing background and the way you articulate things always gets my gears going in a really good direction. So thank you both for your time, your energy, your effort, and for your friendship above all. God bless you all. Until next time, this is Leadership 2.0 signing out. We'll see you next week.